We're going to talk about database security, a little bit about insider threat, but then we'll show you a little bit of insight into some work that we're doing in other areas. And really just as you move up the stack into what's happening at the applications tier, API tier, microservices is starting to play a significant component. And then further and further as you move out, heading into more of the network topology and work that we're doing in that area. And what's been particularly exciting post-acquisition is that the JSonar platform, and you see we've rebranded it as the Imperva Sonar platform, has quickly emerged as the hub technology, if you will, interacting with all the great products that Imperva had already brought to market in these different areas. And each one of the icons that you see in this outer ring is a set of capabilities and products that Imperva has been a leader in each of those respective markets for quite some time. And so Sonar becomes the vehicle for tying this all together. Because for anybody that spent any time at all in the data security business, they know that there's a common trait amongst all these different tools, and that is that they can generate a tremendous volume of raw data. So there's always challenges around how do I manage that data, where do I store it, how long can I retain it, how can I apply analytics to it. So that I can do a better job sifting through all this raw data to find the things that I care about. And then how can I be more effective in consuming this data and finding elements of value that that raw data is telling me? And that's linked into reporting, data enrichment, and then ultimately automation and orchestration so you can do a better job triggering actions, sharing this data with different consumers within the organization, et cetera. And so we've been very hard at work tying all these different pieces together. And you'll start to, there's already elements of that that have been released today in each of the sectors. And then as we move forward throughout the year, you'll see more and more evidence of the convergence. And I can give you a sneak peek example of that. And if you think back to a couple of charts ago where we talked about all the paths into data, and let me just grab a pointer real quick. This is a preview of a solution that we've built that reflects the integration of all these different systems from Imperva. So you can see WAF alerts coming in. You can see database through DRA alerts. There's another component added to the mix in the combined solution around UBA, and then RASP and all the other elements that collectively represent this unified view into what's happening with the data. So this is not a situation where Imperva had some cool technology, JSonar had some cool technology, and in 2 years we'll be able to stitch all this cool technology together and do fun things. It's very real. The integration's already happening, and you'll be the benefactors of that as we move forward. Now, what we're going to focus on today is the database domain, and specifically talk a little bit about JSonar and the Sonar platform. And you guys have already seeded some great questions around what some of the challenges are in database security and how to address them most effectively with this new Sonar platform. And conceptually, what we're talking about is this diverse set of sources coming into the platform. So many of you are already using and certainly familiar with the Impervidam Secure Sphere offering. In this new architecture, the system's equally agile for capturing data from the Imperva Secure Sphere or the Guardium solution for DAM as well. And in fact, the whole premise behind this approach is high flexibility in being able to pull in data from a variety of different sources, create a single view of that data and then take advantage of various engines within the platform to convert that raw data into more effective information. And so if you look at what's happening in the industry, and certainly this was confirmed through some of the questions that were raised, yes, we have some questions around the DAM side of the house, but we have a lot of questions around how does this work in the cloud and how does this work with some of the new data platforms, in particular database as a service, where there is no option for installing an agent. So we're going to talk to that in a little bit more detail, and then continuing to move right. Certainly, there's still a lot of tension around new big data solutions, technologies like Snowflake. On-Prem native logs is having a resurgence for a number of different reasons. And then ultimately, how can we add more metadata and profiling information into the mix? And when I say profiling, I'm really talking about vulnerability assessment information, user rights, classification data, because an effective database security program is really the ability to tie all those different pieces together so that you can have that cohesive view of what's going around at all layers that can affect risk at the data tier. So hopefully that gives you a good sense for, at a very high level, where we are from a strategy perspective, what the new platforms look like. And then from here, we can really roll up our sleeves and jump into the questions and get some answers out there for you.
That's super. Thank you so much for that introduction, Chris. That's really helpful. We have lots of questions to get through. We've already had some great ones in the chat, which gets me super excited. But I thought it would be good to start off. We had a bunch of questions come through from one user around around Sonar, I should say. And I really feel like those are questions that probably a lot of our audience will have at the moment. So shall we kick off with those?
You bet.
Okie doke, let's go. So first one, what are the high availability deployment options for Sonar?
Mark, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can pick that one up. So we've got a complete white paper on HR and HA. Typically, we deploy as a VM solution, so it's very easy to rehydrate and build that. But we can also leverage solutions like load balancers, etc., depending on how we're collecting the data. So in some cases, for example, we're going to read log information, and in those cases, we the log information is still there if a system like a gateway goes down. So we can just simply stand up another machine or put another machine live, and then from there continue to read those logs. If it's an RSS log feed, then we can use something like a load balancer in order to be able to detect whether or not a system is up or down, just like you would with the gateways in a DAM solution.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mark. Can Sonar be deployed in AWS?
Yes. So Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, on-prem. Again, it can be deployed as it's software that needs hardware. So it can either be deployed on a physical system or even in a virtual environment.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I think, Sarah, we would go so far as to recommend that cloud platforms are really the ideal environment for Sonar, just because of the flexibility that they can provide relative to compute resources, storage resources, et cetera. It just makes it a lot easier to take full advantage of the capabilities of the platform. And as the system grows and you find that you need additional storage, or you've decided to change your retention period from 1 year to 3 years or 3 years to 5 years, there are just a lot more options at your disposal to optimize around that.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. The next one, is a clustering feature available with Sonar similar to DAM gateway clustering? If not, how do you recover seamlessly or automatically if you have lots of agentless databases registered to a Sonar gateway and the gateway fields?
So that kind of dovetails with one of the first questions. And it's really, again, it's not necessary. It depends upon how we're collecting the data. With RSS log feeds, we can leverage those types of technologies. if we're reading log files, whether it's CloudWatch or Event Hub, et cetera, it's not necessary in those cases. And in fact, we wouldn't recommend having redundant systems simply for that reason, that we can recover very quickly, easily, and not lose any of that traffic, any of that data.
Yeah. And I think we should probably highlight, for those of you that are not as familiar with JSONAR pre-acquisition, this technology has been adopted and been in production for many years now within some of the largest organizations in the world, enterprise organizations that are household names, using the technology to monitor thousands and thousands of databases. And as you could imagine, particularly in the financial services sector, they have tremendous awareness of resiliency and redundancy, and the architecture has proven itself to achieve all of those objectives. So quite comfortable in that aspect of the architecture.
Hey, Chris, can I just add? So the reason that in cloud environments like AWS or Azure, the reason it could be a simpler architecture is because you usually do have multiple Sonar gateways, but they kind of can remain almost stateless. And the reason they can remain stateless is that the markers can be persisted in the actual cloud environments and APIs. So for example, you could have multiple gateways that are reading from the same Azure Event Hub, and they shard the data. So each one is processing a part of it, and if one goes down, then the other can read it because the marker is persisted inside the Event Hub. And the same goes for kind of all the other platforms. So if you're reading from Oracle Unified Audit, then the source of the data is sitting inside the Unified Audit tables. And if you have one gateway or two gateways or 50 gateways reading from it, each one of them can remain almost stateless. They just have to know kind of which one is responsible for which areas. But it does mean that this whole, clustering and DR and it, anything that has to do with both resiliency and load is much simpler to implement. You don't need to upfront define exactly the cluster. You don't need to upfront do anything because it's much more dynamic because the persistence is in the source, not in the individual components.
That's great. Thanks so much for adding to that. Okay, move on to the next question. Is the DAM MX or gateway necessary in a Sonar deployment using all agentless monitoring?
No, it's actually not required at that point if it's going to be all agentless. The beauty of the solution is that you can have agent and or agentless in the environment. If you're going to leverage agents for specific database platforms or specific locations, et cetera, if that makes more sense, then leverage the agent. You would require, in that case, you would require the gateway, the secure sphere gateway, for example, and that gateway will send its data to a Sonar warehouse, which will have the entire range of data from cloud environments, database as a service systems, et cetera, throughout the entire environment.
Okay, great. This next question you may have just answered, but I'll just check in case. Can agents be registered with Sonar gateways, or can Agentless be registered with 2 DAM gateways? Does that make sense?
So I think I already answered part of that. You can have the agents leverage agents within an environment, and it will send its data to a secure sphere gateway. From there, we will get the data within Sonar. So it doesn't actually get registered per se in the warehouse, in the central store, but it would be managed and be able to provide and Alex can jump in a little bit more on that part of it. On the other side, the agentless doesn't need to send the data to the DAM gateways. If it's collecting the data from Unified Auditing, CloudWatch, as Ron pointed out, any of those other sources, then that data is going to be centrally located outside of the gateways. It'll be in the warehouse, in the Sonar warehouse.
I'll just jump in here, Ed, real quick. For the secure sphere side of things, the agentless approach is called the log collector. And we have multiple systems that are supported through that approach. So if you already have a secure sphere deployment, you can leverage it. But again, to the point is that Marc was making, it's not necessary to have Imperva deployments to monitor using Agentless the entire environment, all the supported databases.
See, we're still on Sonar. We've had a load of Sonar questions, so I'm just going to keep going through them here. Does Sonar store sensitive data?
No. So we redact the data just like you would see with the agent side, just like the legacy DAM solutions. We're going to redact any data. It won't be stored within our local store. And that way we don't become a secondary repository for that sensitive information.
Super.
Yeah, that's the default configuration, but some customers do, it really is up to the requirements. So if a customer has a requirement that they want to, for example, store the full SQL with the values, even for some things, then that's a configuration. So by default, no, but it is configurable. And also, saying sensitive data is a very personal thing. Okay, like if you ask me what sensitive data is, I would say, okay, it's the values, it's the credit card numbers, it's names. Okay, so but in very extreme cases, like the intelligence community, IP addresses is sensitive data. So it all depends on the customer profile, but it is configurable.
Yeah, and there's a whole nother discussion around this. So far it's really talked about how data is stored, but one of the things that it gets a lot of attention in this area is how can data be consumed more effectively. And so on the consumption side, there are a lot of capabilities in the platform to limit who gets to see what within the system. And this is really key to a self-service strategy. And what we found with the Sonar platform is this is very different from how people have used DAM tools in the past. Historically, it's, get all the data into the DAM tool and then have a very limited number of users having access to that data, and they're able to generate some reports and then distribute those reports often as a PDF. So it's pretty static at this point. Whereas we've taken the opposite approach. It says, let's get the data in there, but then let's make it easy for different consumers to interact with that data, provided that we have granular role-based and data level access controls as to who gets to see what. And this has really proven to be a big benefit in the platform for the different customers.
That's super, thank you. We still have a fair few pre-submitted questions here. I know that people have submitted some Sonar questions in the chat as well. We will get to them, I promise. We're just going to make our way through them as quickly as we can now. Can Sonar be integrated with IAM tools for user access recertification?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that specifically, and then we can get into the larger question there. But specifically, yes. Sonar platform has a very extensive API set, as well as the ability for administrators to add to that API set natively out of the box. Having said that, being able to connect to the solution, what the IAM tools are looking to do is be able to manage the users and user rights within a solution. We can leverage Active Directory groups for that. We could even do that natively within the solution. More importantly, though, that API set also allows us to interact and to communicate and connect to a vast array of other systems and solutions. I think we have over 2,000 SOAR integrations, for example. And that's a really powerful set of the Sonar solution and the Imperva solution overall. Ron, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, when I read the question, it wasn't totally clear to me because I could interpret the question in multiple ways. So it could be kind of more technical integration with tools like Okta and Ping and such, or it could be more around kind of when the question says user access recertification, then it could be more like a SailPoint type workflow where you want to kind of review access that people have based on the audit trails and then decide. But I think in both cases, it is something that is supported.
Well, I think there's a couple of other angles to it that we find particularly valuable with our customers in terms of, say, privileged access management and trying to uniquely identify who the individual is sitting behind a privileged access management tool and link that into their actions that they take on a database, or grab metadata from any other source. And I spoke earlier in sort of the high level review of the importance of tying metadata into all this raw data in. And the system's incredibly flexible to be able to pull virtually any information that you have and then join that with the data that we've been collecting with other sources, just to create richer context around that data. There's only so much you can do with a couple of IP addresses in a SQL statement, but if you start to add some risk metrics into it and application data, priority data, et cetera, then it becomes a lot more interesting, not only from a reporting standpoint, but also to drive prioritization and automation.
Next one, can a playbook be used to fine tune or reduce false positives of security alerts sent by SecureSphere?
There are actually several methods that we can use to reduce false positives, playbooks being one of them, but there are other components of the solution that can also look at the data and even learn from prior information. We can build baselines. We can look at a lot of different possibilities in order to be able to reduce the false positives.
Mark, perhaps it will help a little bit to set the concept what a playbook is.
In Sonar, a playbook is really an outline or a process. So to input A, output B in a limited sense. So if I see the information coming in and I process it, I look at it, does this have X, Y, and Z? If it does, then I'm going to send it either to, for example, a ticketing solution or a SIM solution, or I'll integrate it with some other SOAR application, etc. There are other methods that we have, for example, pipelines, UBAs, other types of behavioral analytics, where we can look at the behavior over time and determine whether or not this is an outlier or this is actually something that is just a general activity that occurs within that application or that particular user account.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's especially exciting about the convergence of the two platforms is that Imperva already had a great analytical facility in DRA that many of you have deployed with great success in reducing false positives. On the Sonar side, we also had invested heavily in machine learning analytical facilities, because we knew that, particularly as customers wanted to open up their policy to be more security focused as opposed to more compliance focused, it would just mean more and more raw data that needed to be sifted through. And so we're now in the process of integrating those two systems with one another to provide the best of both worlds from an analytical perspective, and we're quite fortunate that the technology underpinning of Sonar is especially well suited for analytical workloads, which means that we will just continue to get better and better at interpreting this data and minimizing false positives.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. I think we have one more of the pre-submitted questions on Sonar, and then we'll skip on to a couple of the Sonar questions that we've just received in the live feed, because I'm sure people are dying to hear the answers that they've just asked. So the next question is, does Sonar have out-of-box predefined security and audit policies like SecureSphere?
So the concept is a little bit different in Sonar, and Alex can speak to a lot more about the out-of-the-box policies that are in SecureSphere. They are typically trying to define, and as Chris just pointed out, the prior focus was compliance. With security, I want to capture everything and then find the needle in the haystack, and that's what the solution does. The policy, if you will, in Sonar is capture everything. Take all of that data and then use that data for behavioral analytics, alerts, workflows, playbooks like we were talking about before, and be able to provide reporting and dashboards, be able to filter that data to exactly what you need, but at the same time capturing everything, because the concept is different, where the data store that we're capturing this information in was purposely built in order to manage large volumes, data lakes. And that way we can do capture all, in essence, right out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I kind of visualize Sonar, if you're familiar with Edward Snowden and the Prism, and that system that collects all the information from the entire world, and then maybe at some point in 10 years from now, you will need to figure out who did what and who said what on a certain call. That's what essentially Sonar is for. SecureSphere was built around more of a hey, we have these audit compliance, we have this, we need to make sure we keep this information. And unfortunately, we cannot keep everything because of the scale of how much data and information we're capturing, as well as security policies where, we would build them to look for certain things, but it only would work on the new data that was coming in, right? What Sonar allows us to do is to be able to move back and forth between past and present and plan for the future and build these policies that you don't need today that you may need in a few months from now or a year from now to look after. So like the folks here said, the concept is different. The threats and the scape of the data has evolved, and the sources of data and the amount of data, huge scale. So now we have this new approach to look at certain things and be able to look back at things that happen with the security policies that we can build with the Sonar platform.
Yeah, and in fact, Alex, we should probably just provide a frame of reference for this so that when we talk about scale, people understand what we're talking about. And this is certainly key to the architecture as it relates to some of the analytical questions and reporting questions, retention, et cetera. So with this platform, it's very easy to store hundreds of terabytes of raw data in the system, which can easily represent years and years of activity information and have it be readily accessible. And it has to do with the nature of the underlying data store that we're using, so that if the speed of looking for or executing a report on last week is X, then the speed of executing that same report from 2 years ago is basically X as well. And so it provides a whole new dimension to not only how much data I can capture and store, but then also how accessible it is for running all these smart facilities, if you will. And in an extreme case, I've seen customers, one customer in particular, they bring in more than 30 terabytes a day of raw data. And it's because they fully embraced the capture every single thing that happens at the database. And instead of me having to make a decision at the point of collection, I'm just going to get all the data and then make decisions once I have that data. Because that way I have no fear of missing out on information from a particular policy configuration. So,
yeah, I'll just add that, while the platform itself is built for that scale and very often is used like this, system does have out-of-the-box policies for people who are, it's kind of like if you look at it from a security perspective, yes, collecting everything is has a lot of advantages, but we know also that many things are still driven by compliance. And so if you are driven by compliance and you are driven by insider threat and you are driven by privileged users, it's not that Sonar forces you to collect everything. And there are out-of-the-box policies that are called like system policy or whitelists or blacklists that collect only partial profiles. And the reason is not about kind of our side of things. The reason for applying policies is because there is an inherent overhead for everything. Okay, if you're pumping that much data across the network, your network needs to sustain it. If the database needs to log things, then the database is working. And so it's not like the system forces you to collect everything. The system allows you to collect everything. And if you don't, then there are policies that are deployed out so that you can collect exactly what you need. And the fact that it is using an agentless approach with the policy being implemented by the server itself, by the database server itself, means that you can get much more granular. So for example, saying something like, I need to collect only access to data, only access to a certain set of sensitive tables is something that you can't really do with an agent, but you can do with Agentless. And so you can be very surgical. You can be very, very precise at what it is that you're collecting. So you get this best of both worlds, that on the one hand, you don't have to be precise and you can just collect everything and decide later, or you can get very, very precise.
Thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to getting you all back for a specific Sonar webinar as well, because it sounds like there's a lot to cover here. You don't know when you do one of these things, I pull you in for more, so I'm delighted about this. We had one of the live questions here was, you're saying Imperva secures workloads with Sonar. Does that mean it can block as well as detect?
I'll tease this one a little bit, and then I'd like Ron to answer the rest of it. But we're changing this a little bit. On the agentless side, you can't block like you can obviously with an agent. The difference in the approach, though, can be preventing that access in the first place, and then validating it as you're monitoring it and detecting anything that may have been missed. Preventing it in the way that you can use the granular access controls of the database platform itself to prevent that behavior in the first place. Ron, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, this is after 20 years in this space, we kind of learned a few things, okay? And it's and it also very much aligned with the rest of security, okay? The concept of blocking implies that you know exactly what you want to block. Okay, so how do you know exactly what you want to block? You either say, okay, I don't trust Mark. Mark shouldn't do something. But if I don't trust Mark and Mark shouldn't do something, or only Mark should do something, or only five roles should be doing something, then that's something that the access control layer of the database can enforce, and we can instrument that. Okay, so we can define this. The other way of knowing what you want to block becomes very questionable. Okay, so if we're saying, so go back to the question of security alerts and false positives. If you believe that alerts inherently have false positives, then blocking, which is exactly like an alert, but you're actually taking action on an alert, is very dangerous, because now you're going to block something that you shouldn't block. And so when you look at the reason for DRA's existence, is we learned over time that you can't really know when something bad is happening by a single transaction. And I see all kinds of customers saying, oh no, we want to block when somebody takes, does a select statement and gets 10,000 records. Okay, but what happens if I don't do a select that does 10,000 statements? I create a loop that gets me one record, and then another record, and then another record, and at the end of the day, I'll get 10,000 records. So I'll create a stored procedure, and in the stored procedure, I will concatenate those 10,000 records, and I'll pull it back in one record. So we learned that creating a reliable rule set that can block is very difficult and nearly impossible to do. And what we learned is through analytics, we can really discover and be very predictable and precise on knowing when somebody is misusing something. But what DRA does is it uses analytics, and analytics accumulate data and then say, okay, this is bad, we need to take action on it. And the way it works is once DRA analyzes something and we say we need to take action, then we call a playbook. And the playbook can prevent, it can quarantine that user. It can shut down a security group within RDS. It can stop the attack from happening. And so it's a much more mature approach that says what we're trying is to block the attack. We're not trying to block a single SQL statement because we don't reliably know that one SQL statement is good or bad, but we do know how to identify an attack.
That's great. Thanks for that, Ron. It's really great to hear that detail. We have one more question here that I think will move us on then maybe slightly out of the Sonar scenario, but we leverage DRA for user entity and behavior analysis. If we deploy Sonar, would we still need DRA? What's the roadmap for DRA?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'll take that. No. It's a roadmap. So absolutely, DRA is our solution going forward for analytics and threat detection. And in fact, in the last release, what we did was we added all of the agentless collection, like on cloud, as a feed into RDA, so RDA can analyze this as well and create incidents based on not just things coming out of SecureSphere, but things coming out of Sonar. And so the roadmap for us is DRA is the solution for this identification. There is a Yuba layer inside Sonar, which can augment DRA when customers need to build like custom algorithms or custom models to enrich DRA. Then they can do that with Yuba, but certainly DRA is the path going forward with Sonar as well.
Thanks for that. So we'll have a roadmap webinar coming up soon too. Perfect. Okay.
Do you want me to read that question because it's kind of long?
I absolutely love you for saying that, Alex. Yes, please, because I don't know if I would lose my train of thought halfway through. So you go for it. So
I'll try to summarize the scenario. And if you're on the call, which I think you are, and you would like to unmute to clarify, absolutely. So the scenario is as follows. SecureSphere is deployed in AWS, monitoring RDS servers, Oracle RDS and Postgres RDS. And the internal teams periodically rotate the API keys, the access keys. And at the same time as these keys are rotated, we need to update the same keys on SecureSphere to continue the monitoring process. That could create, operationally it's difficult because it's a manual process, and it's also there's a time gap between the keys updated in AWS and then the keys need to be synchronized and updated in SecureSphere. So the answer is yes, you have the ability to, you don't need to go through the UI to update those keys through the click and copy and paste. You can absolutely leverage our API, which we're going to talk about if we have a little bit more time. I'm going to show you some of the resources that are available. There is an article on how to update the log collectors within SecureSphere using API. And I believe, Mark, you wanted to add something else to this question.
No, I think you've probably touched upon all of those pieces. As far as the AWS IAM roles, that's certainly something that we can integrate with. I think Ron mentioned that as well. So I think we're good there.
Yeah, I think it's important because once you get into Data 360, which includes both SecureSphere and Sonar together, then you have multiple ways to get at RDS data. And so, you know, the thing you're talking about, you need the access keys in order to pull the log files. But the other approach is if you stream it to something like CloudWatch Logs, then you can define the Sonar Gateway can have an assumed role that is given to the actual EC2 instance, at which point there's nothing to manage. You don't need to recycle anything. You don't need to change any more keys because the privilege was given to the machine itself and not to something that is making a connection.
Super. Thanks so much. Alex, do you want to take the next one as well?
Sure thing. I don't know. I don't think it's the same person, but the question is actually long. So it's an environment that is deployed in Azure, and you know, it's typical environment, an MX and 2 gateways, monitoring Microsoft SQL, blah blah blah, and SQL SQL. DAM can only read from the Event Hub. Is this a polling method from Event Hub? Yes, it is. What's the interval to poll? You can configure it through the UI as well as through our API, very similar to the previous question. Is there a path to Azure SQL to stop any malicious database activities in real time? I think that kind of piggybacks on what Ron mentioned as far as the blocking capabilities and how to manage that in a real life scenario outside of a POC. I think blocking is a good concept. It's great to show how we can stop in real time, but the reality is in real life scenarios, the real time blocking using agents are some customers are doing it extensively, but a lot more customers are concerned in actual blocking database transactions.
What is the best practice in order to implement Impervidam for SAP HANA databases?
Yeah, so I guess it's not really Sonar or SecureSphere. It really depends what the goals are and what you're looking to achieve from the implementation. I can take the SecureSphere side. You know, if you are able to deploy agents on those servers, there are SAP HANA versions supported, and we have a resource here that we're going to share to make sure that you know which databases are supported by which methods of monitoring. And if you want to take the Sonar approach, Marc, you can add to that.
Sure. So similar to how we would do any of the other native logging events, SAP HANA can leverage as a backend, for example, Oracle. So we would leverage unified auditing in that sense. Just like we would support any of the other databases service, we're going to leverage whatever the best approach is from an auditing standpoint. For Oracle, it's unified native auditing. For others, for example, Postgres in AWS, we would use CloudWatch or CloudTrail. And again, it's just going to depend on that. So if you want to or need to or can install an agent, and that's the better approach, we can do that, as Alex pointed out. Otherwise, we're going to leverage whatever native auditing is available in the platform.
Great, thank you. Agent Management Console can be accessed without any authentication. Do we have any feature where we can restrict the Agent Console access so that only authorized users can access it?
So I'm not sure I understand exactly. You need to have a login to access the SecureSphere dashboard. You need to be an authenticated user to get there. Once you have, every screen that you are entitled to access is available to you. If you want to restrict access to certain users or certain groups using the role-based access model, you're welcome to do so using their RBAC functionality that restricts what each user can view, edit, etc. So we have that ability. We can help you if you need guidance.
Great, thank you. We get a common question from auditors: what list of databases are we configured to monitor via Imperva? Impervidam does not have anywhere, does not have any reports for this answer. Does Sonar help with this report?
So before we talk about Sonar, just real quick, there are some ways. I haven't done this for a long time, but I know there are ways to show which databases we're collating data from SecureSphere. But I'm sure there are additional capabilities in Sonar once we feed into that. Mark.
Yep. And Alex, I'm not sure if that would be a consolidated report, but in Sonar it would be. So in Sonar, we're going to capture all that information. We're going to know what database platforms, what servers are being monitored, et cetera. And you can provide reports on any of that information. You can even create dashboards for them. There's one out of the box, or two actually, asset dashboards out of the box. But you could create an asset dashboard, for example, specifically for auditors, and give them just access to that information.
Yeah. So to your point, it would be a consolidated report, and actually now you're reminding me, it's an option in our dashboard. One of the options on the left is to show the active databases. By default, I think it presents the top 10, but you can save that as a report, and you can configure to, even convert it to a CSV. So yes.
Cool.
Super. Are you able to discover assets without MX or Gateway?
Yes, as well. We do have a classification solution just specific to the Sonar platform, and/or you can use a combination of the two. Again, best of breed in those cases.
Super. Can Sonar work in a hybrid on-prem cloud environment?
I think we've addressed that before, but yes, yep. You can deploy this in AWS, Google, Azure, on-prem. A hybrid approach is what a lot of companies do. And then whether or not, I think Chris mentioned the source, the store itself can be hosted in the cloud and provide access to anyone who needs it. But that's simply a deployment option. You can have gateways, if you will, that are going to consolidate the information from different platforms. If you have a hybrid of Azure and AWS and on-prem, you can have one component collecting that data, and then the system will compress it, encrypt it, redact it as it streams it across the wire to a central store.
Yeah, the vast majority of Sonar deployments are hybrid deployments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, for URM scan, can we use Active Directory account as direct access credentials, or is it required a local DB account required to be configured?
Yeah, so I assume this question is for a SQL server. I believe the answer is yes. You can use an Active Directory account for the SQL server.
Okay. Super. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I know there were a few more pre-submitted questions. Alex, we had discussed before that they were technically feature requests. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit to those questions, or just mention how people can
yes, good point. So let me share my screen real quick. I'll still have you here. So this is the log collector question, and somebody asked me I can actually already share that and with you. And if you looking for additional information how to construct the API call, I can do that as well. I'm going to just share that link with everybody in the chat. The questions were, before we go into what the user voice looked like, the question were, how do we manage all our MX's reports? MX supports exports and imports, but only to other MX individually. It's not supported in some. It is a feature request. We did hear about it from other customers, and there's a way for you to submit those feature requests directly, as well as influence, review the other feature requests that are already in there, whether they are planned or still in discussion or in the works. We have a platform called User Voice, And you can quickly, you should have using your support account user, you should have access to this platform to submit new ideas and upvote existing ideas. You can see that the work on some of these ideas has already started, deferred, etc. So you can absolutely get additional, provide additional feedback and see if somebody had already had a good idea on the subject. Yeah, so there were 3 questions around feature requests. I just, you know, they're available here. Search them up, upvote them to make sure that we prioritize and help customers address their needs.
That's great. And I can respond to the person that submitted the questions, letting them know that that's
there was actually one funny question that came out. What is the most common misconfiguration you've seen in SecureSphere DAM product? So from experience, I've seen 2 types of misconfiguration. One is the easiest one is the people just configure everything and they forget to hit the save button, specifically for direct access information. When it's right there, you do the test and the test fails and you don't know what's going on. Just remember to hit that save button at the top right corner. But from like deeper configuration perspective, there is the concept called table groups, which essentially helps us tag certain tables and certain columns in those tables as belonging to certain types of objects, such as PII data or credit card information or street address or other sensitive type of information. So a lot of times I see customers go through the trouble of configuring them manually or import from some sort of a CSV file into this table group object, and they configure the policies, whether it's security policy or audit policy. But then the traffic comes in and they don't see the data being collected or alerted on. The most common misconfiguration is actually applying that table group to the application. So once that table group is created, it's not associated with any particular database application. All you need to do is go to the server services application, apply that table group there, and then it will work like magic. That's great.
We probably have time for one more. Alex, I don't know or any of the presenters there, if you want to pick one from the pre-submitted, maybe that could be covered.
Yeah, perhaps there's one more. We did talk about API. Our full API and how to use it is available through here. I can share that research, but generally, if you just go to docs.imperva.com, there's a lot of tricks and a lot of good information that's easily searchable and filterable that you can get it right there at your fingertips.
That's great. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We're on the hour exactly. Thank you so much to everyone who asked a question, pre-submitted and here in the live chat. That was amazing. So much content. Thank you to all of our wonderful presenters. That was great. You're very quick on your feet, I have to say. And genuinely, I'll be in touch about another webinar. So to everyone who's joined this one and found it interesting, keep an eye on community. We will be putting this one up as soon as we can, early next week, I'm going to guess. And then we'll be sure to address any additional questions that have come through and make sure they're all on there. But yeah, keep an eye on upcoming events, keep an eye on new posts and blogs. And thanks again for coming. And thanks to all of our presenters. We really appreciate it.